I was sitting in a beige vinyl recliner at Seattle Oncology, the IV drip steady in my arm, when the email arrived. No subject line. Just an attachment. The sender, Mark's attorney. I opened it with shaking fingers. Not from the chemo. From instinct. The PDF loaded slowly over the clinic Wi-Fi, but I didn't need to scroll far. The first line was enough. Dear Mrs. Carson, this letter serves as formal notice of Mark Carson's intention to dissolve the marriage. I stared at the screen. Around me, nurses moved quietly, machines hummed, and the scent of disinfectant clung to the air like static. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just closed the file, unplugged my headphones, and reached into the side pocket of my bag for the thumb drive my father had given me 15 years earlier. It contained every legal document from our marriage, including a file I hadn't looked at since the day I signed it. Carson Prenup, final TDFI. Tapped it open on my laptop, scrolling past the standard clauses. Separation of premarital assets, inheritance protections, mutual confidentiality agreements. Then I stopped on one paragraph, buried quietly on page 14. Under Section 7C, in the event that either spouse voluntarily abandons the other during a medically incapacitating condition, the abandoning party shall forfeit all claim to jointly held investments and real property. My father, a cautious and quietly brilliant attorney, had insisted on adding it. You'll never need this, he'd said at the time. But that's the point. Mark had signed it. He never read the details. He'd skimmed and joked, You don't trust me? I had trusted him, enough to think I'd never have to use it. Now, it was going to be the quietest, cleanest, most devastating counterpunch of my life. Mark left me during chemo. He was about to learn what medical abandonment really cost. Mark and I had been married for 15 years. We met at a university fundraiser. He was there representing his boutique travel firm. I was helping run the silent auction for my school's arts program. He'd been charming in a quiet, practiced way, full of stories about snow-capped chalets and coastal villas. I was a teacher with a modest salary and a well-worn Toyota, but he said he loved my groundedness. We moved in together 6 months after that night and married a year later. My father insisted on a prenup. Mark didn't argue. He even joked about it. Sure, if it makes your dad sleep at night, he said, signing the pages like they were nothing. In hindsight, maybe that was the first sign. Someone who signs everything, but reads nothing. I spent the next decade teaching second grade and building a quiet, happy life. Mark built his business into something bigger. We took trips. We hosted dinner parties. We bought a rustic cabin in Colorado and poured every bonus and windfall into a shared investment portfolio. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable and planning for early retirement by 50. Then came the diagnosis, stage 2, breast cancer. Lumpectomy scheduled, chemo to follow. I told him on a Sunday morning while he was reading the paper. He said, Damn, okay, we'll deal with it. Except he didn't. Within a month he started traveling more. Client demands, he claimed. I believed him at first. I wanted to. That's when Alison stepped in. She and I had been best friends since undergrad. A late-night study sessions and coffee before, class kind of bond. She brought soup. She folded my laundry. She started sleeping on the couch after long days of helping. I didn't ask questions. I didn't have the energy to entertain doubt. But something inside me, call it instinct, call it survival, filed every shift in tone, every whisper behind a closed door, every text Mark didn't want me to see. And then one day he was just gone. No confrontation, no conversation, just that email in the infusion chair with my veins burning and my stomach turning sour. But I didn't get angry, because when the world starts to spin, you hold on to what's steady. And for me, that was my father's voice in the back of my mind. Love people, trust contracts, that thumb drive, that tiny clause on page 14. It was about to become my lifeline, the first thing I did when I got home that afternoon. Still nauseous, still foggy from chemo. Was call the hut my father. He answered on the first ring. I read it, I said quietly. He filed. There was a long pause on the other end. Then, in that calm, surgical voice only an old litigator could master, he asked, "Did he serve you in writing or just through his counsel?" "His counsel?" I replied. "Through email, while I was mid-infusion." Another pause. "I see," he said. "And the prenup?" I pulled it. Clause 7C is still intact, unmodified. I heard papers rustling on his end, like he was already opening a file. "I want Karen to handle it," I said. "Quietly. No fanfare." "Karen still works at the firm," he replied. "I'll call her now." That was the moment I stopped, feeling like a victim, and started feeling like a plaintiff. By the end of the day, Karen, my father's former partner, was on board. She remembered the clause. She had helped draft it. And yes, she said, we could absolutely invoke it, provided it. We had two things: medical documentation and proof of abandonment during active treatment. I had both. Hospital timestamps, prescription records. An email from Mark, timestamped 3 hours after I began my second infusion cycle. A forwarding address for Alison's new apartment, shared with Mark, dated 2 weeks after that. Karen didn't need convincing. "This is airtight," she said. "He didn't just abandon you emotionally. He left during treatment." "And Alison?" I asked. "She has no legal standing," Karen said. "And by the time she learns what's happened, it'll already be over." I hung up and opened my email, attached the necessary medical reports, signed the retainer, and added one sentence to the bottom of the message. "Please move forward immediately. I'd like my next infusion to feel less powerless." I didn't tell anyone else. I didn't post cryptic quotes online. I didn't text Alison some rehearsed monologue about betrayal. I just turned off my phone and let the legal clock start ticking. 2 weeks later, a discreet black envelope arrived at Mark's new address, hand-delivered by courier. Inside were 3 documents: a certified copy of our prenuptial agreement, a letter from Karen's office notifying him that Clause 7C had been activated due to verified medical abandonment a transfer order, formalizing the full legal reallocation of our jointly held investment accounts and the Colorado cabin, effective immediately. I didn't hear from him for 3 more days. Then came the voicemail. His voice was tight, clipped, barely holding back the panic. "Jennifer, what the hell is this? You're seizing the cabin. You're taking the investments? You can't do this. That clause was... it was hypothetical." No, it was contractual. And it was binding. I saved the voicemail, sent it to Karen. An hour later, I received an email from Mark's attorney, trying to schedule a good faith discussion to renegotiate the divorce terms. Karen's reply was a single sentence. "There is nothing to renegotiate. The client's rights are protected under Section 7C. That was the last I heard from his lawyer, but not the last I heard from Alison. She texted me the next morning. "You seriously blindsided us. I thought you were above this. I thought we were friends." I stared at the message for a full minute, stunned by the audacity. Then I typed my reply. "You thought wrong. And for the record, friends don't sleep with husbands, especially not during chemo." I blocked her number. Later that evening, I poured a glass of wine. Just one. And opened the letter Karen had sent me, confirming the asset transfers were complete. The cabin deed now bore my name, and mine, alone. The investment portfolio, once shared, was now fully under my control. Current value, $1.2 million. I smiled, not because I won, but because I was done losing. Mark had walked away from a woman who would have stood by him through anything, and I had walked away from a man who couldn't stomach standing still during the hardest season of my life. He underestimated me. He forgot who raised me. He forgot that my father didn't just teach me how to love. He taught me how to protect it. The next week, I had my final round of chemo. I sat in the same recliner in the same sterile room with the same IV drip, only this time I felt different. My hair was thinner, my body tired, but I had something Mark and Alison would never feel again. Control. The nurse smiled as she adjusted my line. "You're almost done," she said gently. I nodded. "In more ways than one." After treatment, I drove straight to the bank, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to see it with my own eyes. My accounts, my name, the balance of a life reclaimed. The vacation property had already been re-registered, the portfolio reallocated. I changed the password on every account Mark used to access and set new two-factor authentication. Then I did something I hadn't done in months. I booked a weekend retreat. To Colorado, the cabin mine. It was early spring when I arrived. The snow had just started to melt, leaving behind glistening patches of green and icy slush on the gravel driveway. I hadn't been back since before the diagnosis, but everything was exactly as I remembered. The wraparound porch, the quiet hush of pine trees, the fireplace still stacked with logs from the last trip. I stepped inside, dropped my bag, and exhaled. For the first time in a long time, the silence didn't feel like loss. It felt like freedom. I lit a fire, wrapped myself in the same wool blanket Mark once claimed was too itchy, and made a cup of chamomile tea. Then I sat on the leather couch, opened my laptop, and started drafting something I never thought I'd write. A scholarship proposal for young women pursuing teaching degrees whose families were navigating cancer. I decided to name it the 7C Fund, because sometimes all it takes is one clause, one line, one safeguard, one lesson passed down from someone wiser, to save everything. Later that evening, I received an email from Mark. I didn't open it right away. When I did, it was short. "Congratulations on the win. Hope it was worth it." I read it once, then deleted it, because what he never understood was, this wasn't about winning. It was about surviving and building something stronger from the wreckage. By summer, I was in remission. The scans were clean. The fatigue had eased. My hair began to return. Not quite the same shade, not quite the same shape, but it grew like everything else I was slowly rebuilding. I returned to work part-time at the elementary school. My students had made me cards during treatment. Bright, crooked letters that said things like, "We miss you, Ms. Carson," and "You're braver than a lion." I kept them taped to the inside of my classroom closet door. They reminded me who I was before all this, and who I was still becoming. Word of what happened between me, Mark, and Alison had made its quiet rounds through the district. Teachers talk, parents speculate, but no one asked me directly. They didn't need to. I carried myself differently now, straighter, calmer, not hard, but unshakable. One Thursday after dismissal, I ran into Alison in the parking lot of a Whole Foods. She wasn't glowing. She looked tired, rushed. She reached for a bag of groceries, then turned and froze when she saw me. "Jennifer." I gave her a nod. Nothing more. She stepped closer. "I didn't know. About the claws." "That's the problem," I said, evenly. "You didn't care to ask about anything that mattered." She looked down. "He's not who I thought he was." "He rarely is," I replied. "But I am." She didn't argue, just got in her car and left. No apology, just silence, and that was enough for me. That night I returned home, made dinner, and lit a single candle at the center of my kitchen table. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt sovereign. I was no longer someone's wife, no longer someone's patient. I was the woman who enforced a forgotten clause no one thought she'd remember. And in doing so, I reminded them, all quietly, legally, and permanently, what happens when you leave someone for dead who refuses to be buried. Not everything you walk away from stays where you left it. Some of us learn how to rebuild in silence. And then we come back with keys. 1 year to the day after Mark served me divorce papers mid-chemo, I stood barefoot on the back porch of the Colorado cabin, holding a mug of coffee and watching the sunrise climb over the pines. The light touched everything: the porch railing, the frost-kissed grass, the windows of my home. Not our home. Not his. Mine. I thought I'd feel triumphant on this day, maybe even vindicated. But instead I felt steady, clean, whole. The past year had stripped so much from me: my health, my marriage, my trust in people I once called family. But in return, it had given me something sharper and quieter: clarity. I'd learned that betrayal doesn't always look like screaming or slammed doors. Sometimes it arrives with flowers and soft voices, and sentences that start with, "I didn't mean to," but no matter how it comes, betrayal has a weight. And eventually, you decide whether to carry it or use it to build something stronger. I had chosen the latter. Inside, a letter sat on my dining table. It was from my father, handwritten in careful script. "Your mother and I are proud of you. You remembered the clause, but more importantly, you remembered who you are." I folded it and placed it beside the deed, the one that bore my name alone. That afternoon, I finalized the paperwork for the 7C Fund, a grant for women undergoing medical treatment who'd been left by partners, family, or so-called friends. The first round of applications was already live. Within hours, I received the first dozen responses. Every single one broke my heart and reminded me why I'd survived. Not just to move on, but to reach back and pull someone else out. That evening I made a fire, wrapped myself in a blanket, and watched the flames dance without glancing at my phone. Once. Because closure doesn't come when the other person finally says, "I'm sorry." It comes when you no longer need them. 2. He thought he could walk away and keep everything. I let him walk, and kept the only thing that mattered: my future, written in a clause, and signed in silence. And that's how I learned. You don't always need confrontation to get justice. Sometimes it's already signed, quietly, on page 14. Would you have noticed the clause? What would you have done in my place? Tell me in the comments. Hit like. If this one made your jaw drop, subscribe for more true stories of calm, legal revenge, and share this with someone who knows the power of reading everything before signing.